Hi guys, Sarah Hill from Journalism 360. I'm also the CEO of Story Up VR. We're so glad that you joined us today. We have gathered a great group of VR journalists from all around the world who are going to share lessons learned in 360 and virtual reality for the next about a half hour or so. If you have a question for one of these gentlemen and women, you can tweet with the hashtag journalism360. My Twitter is Sarah Mo, or you can also tweet journalism_360. We're monitoring those feeds and we'd be happy to answer some of your questions. So let's get started with some introductions. Obviously, all of us probably have shared some similar lessons over the last year in 2016, creating virtual reality. But Thomas, let's go ahead and start with you. First off, introduce yourself and tell people where you work.
Hi, so my name is Thomas Simha. I live in France, where I work, where I was born. The VR editor at Euronews, which is a pan-European channel. And we shoot, edit, and publish VR in up to 13 languages. And we've shot our first video in February 2016, so it's almost been a year. Great.
Robert Hernandez.
I'm Robert Hernandez. I'm a digital journalism professor at USC Annenberg. For the last year and a half, I've been teaching virtual reality and journalism under the brand Journalism, but instead of a U, it's a V. It's a cute typo. We've worked with ProPublica, the Texas Tribune, currently working with the Center of Investigative Reporting, Reveal News, and working on a lot of different VR type of storytelling techniques.
All right, Robert's based in California. Claudia, good to see you.
Hello, so my name is Claudia Brett. I'm based in New York City, and in the last 6 months, I've been working with different media organizations. I work as a VR producer for Univision. I'm the 360 video editor, one of the 360 video editors for Associated Press, and sometimes I film for the New York Times 360.
Great, glad to have you joining us. Dennis, how are you?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Dennis. I am the editor and the founder of Haptical, a news and information source for all things about virtual reality. I've been a technology journalist for the last 6 years and traveled all around the world following all the new trends. So right now I'm in California working on my new media startup, Haptical. And then I've been testing actually 360 videos back when I was in New York. I used to be a CUNY fellow. And then still here in Nevada City in California, we've been also testing with 360 gear. So I'm happy to share my experiences with you.
Great, glad to have you in the Hangout today. And hi, Lewis, how are things in the UK? Actually, go ahead, Lewis.
Yep. Hi, I'm Lewis Jebb. I'm the founder and CEO of Immersively. We're a London-based company and we make news content in virtual reality, principally in 360-degree video. And we've been doing so for just over 2 years now. And it's great to be in this group. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And Ray, how you doing, Ray Soto?
Hey, yeah, so I'm Ray Soto. I'm the design director of emerging technology at the USA Today Network. I've been working on developing VR experiences for roughly 3 years now. I'm a former video game developer that kind of transitioned to the journalism industry. Find it a very exciting opportunity to tell great stories. And very excited to be a part of this group. Looking forward to hearing lessons learned and sharing what we've learned as well.
Great. So let's talk about those lessons learned. And basically what we'll do, we'll go around and have everyone share one, and then we'll have everyone share again. So Ray, since you're warmed up, let's start off with you. And you have some fascinating math behind your board. So perhaps maybe there's some math that you can teach us journalists there. So lots of lessons from not only cameras and editing and stitching. What reigns paramount to you and what you've learned in 2016 and what you could tell not only the experienced creators out there, but those journalists, those fixed frame journalists that are interested in getting into immersive journalism?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we were trying to drive towards this year, and it was the most challenging thing towards the beginning of the year, was driving the user's point of view within a 360 canvas. You know, within video games, we've got plenty of different, clever techniques and whatnot. But for video, those issues are kind of exacerbated a bit more, just in the sense of, well, we can't tell the user to look in this direction. We can't force them. You know, there's the sense of the immersion can be broken, or it becomes the motion sickness and on from there. So most of my work as a design director has been leveraging, each unit's a limited, field of view, 90 degrees, 110 degrees, and on from there. But also combining the math side of things with design techniques and leveraging the user's unconscious kind of, the brain unconsciously receiving these signals to determine, oh, I should look in this direction. And what I mean by that would be, leveraging your environment's natural perspective lines, setting up the camera and how you position the canvas so the user notices motion and notices these perspective lines to drive towards a focal point. At the same time, using the math behind that, how do we create, design, graphic design elements in them? How do we animate them? Do we peek them in just a bit? Do we, they move from one direction to the next? So I'd say that was the biggest challenge and one of the things that we ended up learning throughout the year. I wouldn't say we've perfected it, but we definitely have something there. And when you combine it with all the other things that I'm sure these other folks will share, it's really lent us towards being able to guide the user as opposed to force them.
Mm-hmm. Guide them gently. By show of hands, how many others in the Hangout have also learned some lessons when it comes to directing attention? Okay, so Louis,
I think it's an essential part to do that. Oh, it's an essential part. Sorry to interrupt. I think it's an essential part that Ray and I had a conversation about, we're surrendering this control, but the truth is you're not. You can, of course, but the truth is you're not. And with Ray's game development background, really kind of brings that type of technique to this type of storytelling. When you have things like Grand Theft Auto or what have you, where you can be anywhere in this immersive world, large world, somehow you still go along these streets. And so what we've been doing is playing with light and dark. If we want to call your attention, instead of putting arrows, maybe we just dim here and keep this bright spot there. We haven't done too many usability testing to see if people catch on to that. So I don't have any scientific kind of background or math like Ray might have. But we're playing with that depth of field, making things go blurry and having you look around for like, oh, what just happened? And there's a bright spot in that tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Claudia, you've been playing with spatial audio as well to direct attention. You've obviously learned some lessons with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the first lessons I think for VR journalists is also like when we decide to jump into something new. Because in our case, we started experimenting with spatial audio during the summer when still it was like quite difficult to like record it, upload it, and like do all the process of post-production, no? So we knew that we were early, but sometimes I was wondering, like, maybe what would have happened if we had waited like 2-3 months that the platforms were more ready, no? So in a way, innovation is really related to like innovation in platforms. So we are like really dependent on technology, which we already knew, but I think it's important to keep it in mind, no? How our processes are depending on like others' innovations. But the main lesson we've learned mainly beyond all the technicalities that are getting easier is to know where the center is of the sound and the image. Because like we will be recording sound and image separately, but it's not about like just synchronizing as we did before. We need to synchronize it in the space. So in our case, we had this issue where the sound person was keeping in mind that the center of the action was in one side. Me in post-production, I shifted the center, and then we were like, what's going on? Like we hear this audio, it's like off, like what is the problem? No, and I was like, no, you have the problem. Like the video is okay, I uploaded correctly, like the platform. So it took us a while to like realize what was the mistake. And basically is realizing that we need a center, we need to communicate a center between sound and video. And the good news, I think, is that the new plugins that I'm seeing for Premiere and Pro Tools and what the Facebook 360 workstation is working on is in making this easier. So this connection between the center of the image and the center of the audio. But still, I think it's something that will need to work in production and in journalism when in many cases we don't really know what's going to happen. I'm not sure how we will solve that. So it's a new challenge maybe for 2017.
Yeah, so that's really interesting what you said about centering the audio and the video. So where you place your tripod and where you place your ambisonic microphone, are you saying they should be placed at the same place or at different places?
They need to be placed at the same place. But when I talk about center, I talk about the opening of the sequence in video, like the first scene that we see in the beginning of the sequence, and let's say microphone number 1 that it's also facing in that direction. So I need to know that that direction is like, let's say, my lens number 1 and my microphone number 1. And if I shift this in video, I need to know that then I have also shifted the audio and I'm in microphone number 3, let's say.
Right. And Louis, you're shaking your head, directing attention either with audio or anything else, something you guys have a challenge you guys have been dealing with as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely interesting what Claudia just said. I mean, one of the things in the actual editing tools would be interesting is the extent to which you can graphicize, as it were, use graphics to show how the audio is centered as well, which at the moment, everything's linear. In, say, Premiere Pro or Final Cut. It's just an interesting challenge in itself. In terms of capture and editing, I just wanted to highlight some more basic things which have been highlighted, not by me, but by bloggers such as Nick Bitchenich, about keeping people's arc of attention when you do a jump cut and edit. And I just wanted to highlight the work that he and other people have done in simply demonstrating that once you have somebody's attention at the end of a sequence or whatever, and you're doing a cut, that do make it easy for them when you go to your cut, and keep it within the same ambit. I mean, gone are the days when you want to challenge people when there's a cut to find the center, as it were. And that's a point which has been made very well by a number of people this year. So I thought it was worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm. Definitely those lessons in the editing and some of those tools. One of the lessons we learned is just the value of that offset tool that's in Premiere, that you can move it right and left. Before, we were having to re-render out pieces of video where it was adjusted horizontally, so that would be center, and now you can just drag it left and right in Premiere, which is a great tool. So how about you, Thomas? What challenges or lessons have you learned in 2016?
I guess my perspective is slightly different because I work in a larger newsroom and I'm supposed to evangelize the newsroom and have people with a lot of experience in TV journalism and editing use this new medium. And I think a lesson for me has been almost like a lesson of humility, which is I can come with my nerdy knowledge of the medium, of the rigs, of the camera, but trusting the journalist to come up with a good story on the ground has been rewarding in a way, because happily surprised many times when, after just briefing them on a technical side of things, a home very good rush, and we edited very good story with it. So for those of you and who work with larger organization, trusting journalists with a lot more experience but no knowledge can be maybe a bit difficult because you think they're going to screw it up, but eventually it brings a lot of very good stuff.
Very good stuff indeed. Dennis, you're quiet over there. What lessons have you learned in 2016?
Oh, okay. One quite important thing that I learned recently, because I was involved in advertisement production actually here in Nevada City. The stitching edges, extremely important. I mean, the production, it was a great team of people. We worked together, but the stitching edges, we failed on the stitching edges. So, and it was a crowd of people, like we were like almost like 10 or 12 people in the scene. It was a advertisement of a bar actually here. So the stitching edges created a lot of problems later on. We saw it on the post-production. So once you're out in the field, I highly recommend you check it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, the stitching edges, especially if you're dealing with a Samsung Gear 360 or Ricoh, because then the stitching edges are quite visible. So that's one thing that I think every production should really take care of and be very careful to not to put their main figures on the stitching edges. Otherwise, the whole scene gets really messed up. And yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Adding to this, I don't know if you were gonna say it, but use the stitching edges to like share light. So if you have like a focus of light or the sun, use the stitching line to know that you have to put it in the middle, so you have equal light in both lenses. No, that's also a very important one.
Definitely, because we had to now. I think the team has to reshoot all the scene again because of these stitching edges.
Oh.
Yeah.
To push back a little bit about the stitching edges, of course, don't put your main character on that line. That makes sense. Anything important should not be there. But one of the things that I'm taking away from this year is that the average user, is a lot more forgiving about stitches than we are. We're uptight, we're nitpicky, and we should be to kind of elevate our craft and make sure it's as realistic as possible. But we did user testing with one of our first projects, and there's this kid whose head is in 4 stitches. It was like the worst, and I rebuilt his head, and it morphed. No one noticed or cared. And that's one of those things. Of course, if you see it, it takes you out of it. But the likelihood of them looking up or finding that stitch that moment when someone is walking through that scene is not as dramatic or drastic as we feel like it is. So that's one thing I would add. I'm more calm with my stitches, but I'm still a perfectionist trying to get it just right.
I'd like to add one more thing to what Robert said, actually. I mean, and then the second thing that I learned, is that technically, as you said, the audiences are still discovering the 360. So these technical problems could be, not that highly important. The environment is very important. The place where you're shooting the 360, that's quite important. People love exploring the scene. If you're in a colorful scene, especially, there's things going around. People love that. Obviously, there's a level for that. I mean, it doesn't need to be like lots of things going on, obviously, in one time. But the place, it's very important. The scene, the environment. So because people still are still exploring. That's what I learned. That's the second thing that I learned actually this last year.
Yeah, Chad Lafarge too is shaking his head. He says in chat, he's our producer, by the way. You see him down there in the thumbnails. He says tape the edges where the talent appears so that they don't always walk across that line. And the only issue for journalists is that we're not supposed to choreograph the scene. So we kind of have a tug on the heart space. And sometimes it's easier to flip the camera than it is to say, okay, you stand there, or at least ethically, you stand there. So moving the camera is a lot easier than sometimes moving those cameras, moving those characters in the scene. One of the things I learned is a simple can of compressed air to cool down some of those Hero 4 Blacks or those GoPros. Some of you guys are using GoPro rigs, and as we know that, especially in the heat, as we found in the Amazon and Congo, they do not last long. But you can get 15 minutes more if you spray a dose of compressed air right underneath the lens. For some reason, it cools it down. So what other gear tips do any of you all have, or lessons learned that you learned this year?
Here's one that was a nightmare for us. We had a 7-camera rig that had an external battery. So the battery was below, cables were hanging out. Solved that problem of overheating, but caused another problem, which was one of the USB cables connected to an extra camera, which we didn't use, was hanging out and was in the shot. We had to, luckily it was behind us, but we had to cover that up. We had to clone it out, Photoshop it out. And that makes me nervous as a journalist, but having a micro USB cable in the way, I think is worse. But like, check your, I think Dennis said this, check it again. It's those little things that will just really make you get extra gray hairs when you go in post-production.
Yeah, on the checking side as well, is we've done a few spatial audio experiments, I guess you could say. And the unfortunate thing is, most of the stuff that we had captured initially we couldn't use because the gain levels were set too high. We were more preoccupied with ensuring that the cameras were fine, that the audio side was still new to us, that we thought, oh, you know what, it'll be fine. And it wasn't the case. And I'm not an audio expert. I'm sure that Claudia could share a little bit more on that. But we had to double, triple check everything. And with our spatial audio stuff now, we're still not experts at it. We are getting better, but it's one of those things that throughout the year, testing one thing, double checking, and then without live preview, who knows where it's going to go, and just kind of cross your fingers and hope something comes out.
Yeah. With this, I like your lesson, Sarah, of the air. I will apply it. I normally bring always, if I'm using the GoPro rig, like the screw driver, you say? Mm-hmm. So in a moment of crisis, you can at least like take out the cameras and like let a little bit of air cool down the rig. But I think that the best discovery has, for me at least, has been being able to use the Samsung camera and then like feel much more free and not being so trapped with all these kind of technicalities and also like being able to like just run around and like place the camera very quickly and know that it will be filming. Like that's I think that's a very big shift in the journalism.
So the Samsung camera, you're talking about the Samsung 360 camera. What are in the rest of the group? What are your go-to rigs? Shout them out. What are some of the rigs that you like to use right now?
We have all the cameras, and the Samsung being one of them, but right now I'm in love with the Omni because it's an external battery. It's all gen locked. I don't have to worry about synchronizing. I still have to manually stitch it. I don't have to manually stitch it. It's not as hard as before, but I get much better quality than a Samsung. We did a production in Central California where we shot both the 360, the older 360 rig and the Samsung, and those GoPros still have much better quality. But with the Samsung, it's much quicker. We're going to use it for projects that turn around really quick. We did one project, and they did overheat. We did a firmware update, and that kind of calmed it down. But a student did find, a little fun fact, that he put a bag of ice on top of the camera during stitching and rendering, and it rendered quite faster. He sent me photos of it. It's awesome. He put a bag of ice on the cameras, a bag of ice on the phone, and it rendered and stitched faster.
Yeah. Robert, I have a question for you. Omni, which Omni are you using? I mean, the 4K or the other one?
It is. I think there's only one Omni, and it's just the setting on your camera. It can go up to, what is it, 2 point something?
2.7K.
Yeah.
Or 4K. You can shoot 4K.
Yeah. It's just it depends on the setting on your camera.
Okay. Thank you.
It's got an output of above 8K. Like if you were to shoot each camera 4K, whatever, 6 times 4 journalists doing math, 24K. But obviously there are no players, so that's why a lot of people shoot 2.7K because collectively all of them together come out to 4K. So what other cameras are you guys using that you like? Thomas?
Yeah, we actually have a contract partnership with Samsung, so we are obliged. No, we must use their camera. It's an exclusivity partnership. But for what we do, and I agree with the limitation in terms of output, and the overrating is a problem, and we had some fogging issue as well. But eventually, for what we do here, with just a small tripod, a mic, and a camera, and it works, just fits our needs, and
you are sideways,
with it.
We're losing. You're sideways. We're losing.
I don't know what happened.
No, that's all right. Hey, Louis or Ray, how about rigs for you? What's your favorite rig? It's like a flavor of ice cream. One day you like one day you like another.
So personally, I really like the Theta for just run and gun shooting stuff. I take it on every trip I go to. I take it to concerts, just snap a few things. So as personal for photos, I love the Theta just for the ease of use and being able to carry in my back pocket. For quick production stuff, the Samsung Gear 360 is a favorite, and I even like the Izu rigs. I mean, I've used them for a little over a year now. But for the production stuff, the more GoPros, the better. But then we consider the post-production. But as far as my go-to for photos, the Theta, I really like the Izu, the ZX or Z2X, I think it's called. Really like that one. I use that one quite often. So I'd say those are kind of my two.
How about the Izu 4 cam? And you guys had luck with that?
Yeah, we've used those as well. What we do is we identify, and I'm sure everyone else does this as well, but what's the scene that we're trying to capture, and basically from our tool set, which camera will work best based on the details that are kind of captured, the scale of the scene. But as far as just quick, we know we can capture this stuff and do post-production fairly quickly. The 2 or the 4, I'd still prefer the 2. It's not great for higher resolution, more detail, but those are kind of my go-tos.
Mm-hmm. Louis, what's your go-to?
Samsung 360. For us, it's been transformational. I think also I'd like to make the point, I think it's very important and great for the future of the industry that 2 large companies, New York Times and Euronews, are using Samsung 360 workflow because they're connecting to the consumer. So, for this to take off, people have got to be submitting, citizen journalism in 360. It's a huge boost to it. So personally, for our company, what it gives you, of course, is the ability to instantly report on something. So I spoke at a dinner the other day, and this actor did a poetry slam about a brilliant of a poem he's just written about virtual reality. So within 3 days, we set up a location, got an audio guy, and we've captured it. And we were able to choose the take. We said we think we like take 7, and we all watched it, and then we went home. Goes to the point. And of course, we're going to do that. We're going to patch in the decent audio later. But with the camera audio, we were able at least say that it was word perfect, and that we were happy with the take. Because like anything, when you're on location, it was in a theatre, there are audio bugs always. And but the great thing is, goodness, it reduces the stress. Mm-hmm. And very happy with the quality. And we've intermixed it on commercial work with GoPros, and the client and the consumer do not notice. Do not notice. Super geeks would notice, but where you need a little camera to go through something. So I think it's, for us, absolutely transformational, because the great thing is that with minimal crew, i.e. 1 person, you can go and get a story. And one other point I'd like to pick up on that is, I think this is an absolutely key point, which I'm sure we're going to get to, and that is that what is suitable for capture in this format, and not limiting yourself. And it's very liberating having, as it were, an instant rig like that. I think what it does is it stops people limiting themselves. I mean, this is talking very generally about what topics can be covered. And of course, you always want to have a context in 360 where the sphere enhances the experience. But the great thing is it's much easier to capture the story. And with the Theta or with the Samsung, I think, Samsung's a joy. So.
Yeah, I would agree there, and I would say, beyond the proprietary rigs of Jaunt and Ozo, the Omni, but also I have a camera crush on the Sony Z Cam S1. So I get it this month. I'll let you know how it goes. And also the Nano 360 that just plugs into your iPhone. So for quick items, they've done a lot of tests that's comparing them, and the color saturation to me looks really fascinating. So those are some of our go-to rigs. We are wrapping up here. We have just a couple more minutes, but I want to go round robin with one last lesson that you've learned. It doesn't have to be about gear, can be about anything that you've learned over last year. Impart your wisdom in this next minute. Quickly, Claudia?
So mine is a little bit philosophical maybe, but I try, when I go to film or I'm producing something or I'm editing video, I try to think about that the whole is greater than the parts, so that the whole I'm seeing and what's going on, the audio, the scene itself, the story is greater, and that's what makes 360 meaningful.
Great. Dennis?
Yep. The experience, I think for now, apart from all the technical problems, the experiences that we are bringing to the audience, I think it's the most important thing now, because audiences are still exploring the technical sides. And plus, I'm very excited about Facebook's live 360 videos next year. I think that's going to be huge. That's going to be amazing. And more brands will jump into it. That's what I believe. I think for next year, Facebook Live 360 will be one of the biggest things, I guess.
Great. Facebook Live 360 rolled out to some select publishers. Thomas, how about you?
I've last lesson of the year. Failing is okay if you create sort of a feedback loop that you understand what went wrong and how you can improve yourself, which is how you get experience. If you don't analyze your mistake, you can't really improve. And that's something we've worked here to build, and with the help of Luis, actually, we've looked at what we've done, and sometimes it's hard, to have a critical look at what you've done, but it's necessary.
Necessary indeed. Robert's shaking his head. Parting words?
Oh man, I got like 3 things, but like one quick one.
Yeah, go through all of them. We got time.
Don't run with the camera rig because people don't know that camera and you look suspicious. We've been stopped by the police a few times. Lewis is laughing over there, so I guess that's a good point. I've been writing a lot about diversity and inclusion. I want to, the whole point of 360 is to capture perspective from all around. And I've been seeing conferences and meetups that are very male dominant, white male dominant, and that is not the reality of this inclusive 360 community. And you see that with our panel and how we share knowledge. It is the benefit to include everyone. It's better business to include both genders, because why would you exclude half the market? And they're the leaders in the industry as well. And then the last thing is something that Lewis and I kind of shared during dinner at a conference. While we're in love with these emerging technologies that will be giving us headaches and then solutions and new challenges throughout the year, the bottom line is a good story is a good story. Regardless of the camera, regardless of its spatial audio or not, regardless if it's 2D or flat or 360, a good story is a good story. And the only way we're going to find good 360 stories is by trying and, like Thomas said, failing. We've got to go out there. We got to see what happens if I move the camera. What happens if I shake the camera? What happens if I put the camera on the drone? Someone might get sick. You don't publish that. But you have to try and keep learning to find what is a good story in this format, but not compromise the essence of that story, right? We're storytellers.
Yep. Ray?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the last two. The storytelling is a major component, and one of the things that's actually excited me about this past year is that the stories have gotten better. It started off with experimentation, ourselves included. Quick cuts and on from there just don't work. But the one thing I was going to get on was pacing. Pacing is very, very important, especially within this medium. You have to combine the storytelling side of things and how you edit, but at the same time, driving the user's direction, where they look, giving them the amount of time to kind of take that scene in. So I'd say pacing is a major component. At the same time, scale on the design elements, where you place your camera, how certain things appear based on the field of view for different players. I could go on and on and on, but those are my 2 biggest things, would be pacing and scale are 2 lessons learned throughout the year, and I expect that the industry will continue to kind of learn and we'll get better together. We'll continue to share and treat this as kind of like an open source community.
Open source indeed. Lewis?
3 points I'd like to make. One, we have found increasingly that 360 video is a great intimate format.
And Lewis, just real quick, we've got a rubbing on your mic. If you put your hands to your side, I think it'll keep it from rubbing on your lapel, because we're hearing some rubbing. There you go. Now go for it.
One, that 360 video is a great intimate format. And we've been experimenting with a number of what I call one-to-one formats. So with a poet, with an artist in their studio, patchwork narratives, stories of cities built on individual narratives. Because when we started in 2014, our first video was a demonstration in Hong Kong, pro-democracy, big spectacle. Increasingly, what really interests me is the intimate approach. I'd like to make a couple of industry points. We got into this thing in the hope of reestablishing trust in mainstream news, and that's what drove the company in the first place. And I think 360 video and machine learning have an important role to play in reestablishing trust in mainstream news, especially given the horrors of fake news and post-truth society. And there's a great deal of work to be done on that in the coming years, and very interesting work. And secondly, that news companies, whether they're small, big, old or new, need to be putting this format at the center of what they do and using it to drive new audiences to the rest of their already monetized companies or whatever it might be, because there's a great opportunity there, and that people, that whatever size news company, need to think in terms of the fact that this is a way of, finding a new business plan, as it were, and driving people to your existing ecosystem and not seeing it as a special case. These things take time, but those are the areas that we're pushing in.
That's great. Well, from our perspective, obviously story is still king, and the business of VR, the lessons that we've learned has been that you can sell virtual reality. You can sell virtual reality even in the middle of Missouri, because it is a different medium. It's a more compelling medium. People watch it longer, they share it more, and it does something very specific to your brain. It actually changes the brainwave patterns. Also, eye contact is huge in the sphere, and your interviews need to be looking at the camera. That's something as a fixed frame journalist we would have never told somebody to do. Look at the camera. We always tell them look at the reporter, because you want them to make that connection, so they'll ask, have an appropriate rapport. That's all thrown out the window in the sphere. You want your interview subjects most of the time to be looking directly at that camera, because that's that unique sense of empathy that you get, intimacy that you get when they are just moments away from you. So eye contact has been something that we learned. Also distribution. Make sure all of you, especially all of you indie VR journalism studios, that you're getting your distribution partners secured before you shoot. So all of those legacy media organizations are not going to run your VR stories unless they have a dog in the fight. And that means unless they have a reporter that goes with you to Zambia or wherever to record it. A lot of them are hesitant to air things that they didn't have their hands in the batter to know how it was made. So that's really key to make sure that you have those distribution partners aligned before you even set up the door to cover those stories. And a lot of studios that aren't major legacy news organizations are encountering that, because distribution, as we all know, is a problem. It's fragmented across half a dozen different platforms. And so that's what a lot of people are turning to. They're teaming up with people who do have megaphones, who can provide a platform for some of that content. So those are the 3 lessons that we've learned at StoryUp. Any other parting words before I go? I know I've kept you 10 minutes longer than I said I would, but you've been excellent guests, and I appreciate you opening up and sharing some of the things that you've learned this last year.
We haven't reached the promised land yet. Keep pushing forward. It's one of those things where throughout the year, I wouldn't even consider VR mainstream yet, but there is an opportunity. As everyone has been sharing, you have to get out there and experiment. We can't just say, as an industry, wipe our hands clean and say, all right, we've done VR, we should start exploring the next thing. I think there's an opportunity there, but let's keep pushing forward. That's just kind of a parting words, I guess you could say, that let's keep pushing this forward, because I'm excited about seeing what everyone else is developing, and I want to see this grow within this industry.
Great. And a note that if you're interested in learning more about this industry, you can sign up for Journalism 360. Journalism 360 is a group that all of these individuals are involved with, not only for events, but there's grants that are going to be rewarded after the first of the year. There is community building, conversations, what kind of gear do you use? All those questions that the chances are you're having right now. If you go to our Medium blog, that's medium.com/journalism360, you can read a lot of the blogs from some of these individuals in the Hangout right now who are sharing their wisdom and some of the lessons that they've learned. So with that, we will wrap up. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And I would just leave by saying that story is still king despite the tech. I'm Sarah Hill for Journalism 360. We'll see you later.
Thank you.